So to start with, we're going to talk about main adjustments outside of the cab here on the combine that we'll want to change for crop types, or perhaps we'll want to tailor to different crop conditions. The primary focus that most people think about are the 5 main settings of the combine. So you're going to be adjusting your concave clearance, rotor speed, fan speed, top and bottom sieve. In addition to that, we've also got some other adjustments like spreader speed, elevator speed. We can also adjust our feeder speed. We also have what's called unload auger tents inside of the grain bin floor that are adjustable for height, and you can set those up as high as high as they go for dry corn and get away with it, but in wet corn we would probably set those down so that we're not unloading quite so fast. We could get into a condition if we're unloading high moisture corn where we would shear some the shear bolts, and so we don't want to do that. We've also got header and feeder angle that we need to address. So we're just going to cover these settings. Okay, so the first setting we're going to talk about is rotor speed. On the Flagship combine, we have a gear select shifter here, and it has been my experience, and maybe yours too, that when shifting gears, it's always a good habit just to turn the engine off. A lot of times we've heard reports that the rotor transmission doesn't fall completely into the detent with the engine running. So it always seems to work real well if we shut the engine off and get that baby in gear. So for corn, we're probably going to be more likely to be in first gear, and then soybeans probably in second. Third would be used primarily for some of the smaller grains like grass seed and so on. So primarily, of course, we adjust our gear position out here, and we'll talk about the fine-tune setting in the cab. We have a variable adjustment on our rotor speed through the CVT transmission via a toggle switch in the cab. And so primarily we want to be in the right gear, and then the rest of our settings will be performed in the cab on that on the rotor speed. Since we're standing right here, we could also address our chopper stationary knives. The adjustment handle is right here, and so we want to have the stationary knives engaged for soybeans and disengaged for corn. If we happen to forget and have our knives engaged for corn, the cobs are really rough on the counter knives, the stationary knives on the chopper. I thought I'd come back in here, take a glance at the chopper, just to give it a little better idea of what we're talking about here. This is the standard cut or coarse cut chopper this combine is equipped with, and we've got the stationary knives that come in from the bottom of the pan here, and so that handle that we were adjusting on the outside basically swings those up for a fine cut and swings them out of the way for kind of takes them out of the picture for corn. So we just want to make sure we have that set appropriately. The next thing we'll want to look at is our chopper speed, and there's actually a shift collar behind the chopper drive pulley, and of course we want to make sure that the engine's off when performing this adjustment. Don't know if you can see it real well here, but there is a little decal. See if I can get my lighting. Here we go. And there's a picture of a rabbit and a tortoise. Of course, rabbit would be high speed, and the turtle would be slow speed. So for our example, of course, high speed we would use in soybeans or other small grains, whereas we'd want to be in the slow speed position for corn. Okay, so to perform this adjustment, I'm going to squeeze the two collars together, and sometimes it takes a little bit of rock on the pulley, and you can pull the collar towards the front side, of course, for slow speed, and the collars will snap back apart, and that's verification that you are in the proper selected speed. So, and then once again, to go back to high speed, a little squeeze of the pulleys, and a little shake, and she'll pop into the high speed. The next setting we're going to look at is the Precip Adjustment. The Precip Adjustment is performed by moving this lever up or down, and the Precip sits way up front, of course, and we can we're just going to demonstrate. The book will call for this Precip to be set in the 3rd or 4th notch, depending on if we're running in corn or beans. So we'll probably want that in a more closed position for beans, and then slightly open, more open for corn. But we never really want to take that much farther open in corn, because we'll have a tendency of overloading the cleaning fan. So here's a little bit better idea of what our Precip adjustment looks like. So by moving my handle up and down here, you can see those Precips open and close. There are a few adjustments on the new Flagship combines that can be performed. We can adjust the angle of the left and right side spread pattern, as well as the center portion and how much of our chaff gets spread in the middle. So to do that, we've got to open up our windrow door if equipped, and then over here on either the side there's a couple of latches. We're going to disengage, and then there's a handle down low we'll grab hold of, and this entire spreader assembly will swing up. Down here in the center you have an adjustment, they call this the whale's tail, and you can adjust this narrower portion of the whale's tail up and down, and actually have some of the chaff and straw come out more into the center, so you can fine-tune your spread to the center and fill that in, as well as to the outsides. So depending on how your combine's equipped, you may have electric actuators that adjust your side patterns from the cab, as well as an actuator that would adjust this center whale's tail. But be aware of that. Also, there's a couple of bolts, actually 4 bolts here on the top that attach the whale's tail, and there's a couple different positions you can place that in. And what you're basically looking for is the clearance between the whale's tail and the spreader blades. This one is actually set for corn right now, and I might see some trouble on a 40 or 45 foot head in beans or wheat. Maybe if I was trying to spread out pretty far, I'd probably set this whale's tail a little bit closer to this blade. But we're in a safe position for guys that are running 30 and 35 foot platforms. You could probably run it in this position for corn and grain, for like wheat and soybeans. But what you would not want to do is run it tight in corn. So you never want to run this clearance tight in corn. We're actually in the corn position now. If we ran that tight in corn, it actually just causes so much impact of the cobs on this whale's tail that it'll have a tendency to crack. So we want to make sure that we have that adjusted out. So the next thing we'll want to do is pull our latches again, and we're going to swing this spreader back down into harvest position. So we've brought the spreader back down, and we're going to close our windrow door, and we're back to field position. While we're on the topic of spreaders, we should also discuss the deflector shield on the back side of the rotor. What can happen in some of the smaller grains like soybeans and possibly wheat. The combine may have a tendency to have slightly higher distribution on the right side than the left, and so we actually have a deflector shield on the back side of the rotor. It's an option. Not all the combines probably have this. I don't know, it might be a standard now, but there's a handle behind the clean grain elevator and the tailings processor, and there's a decal with some instructions, and you basically pull that handle in or out, and it actually deflects some of the material closer to the left side of the combine to try and reduce that right side buildup. So there's different settings for different crop types, and of course there's some information in the operator's manual that you can follow on that as well. Another adjustment we're going to look at is inside the grain tank. And earlier we talked about the unload auger tents. That's these covers here with the adjustment on top, and you can actually take the tents, as they call them, the unload auger tents, and set those down closer to the auger to limit the unload rate, or up a little bit higher to speed up your rate. So there's two of them in here, and you just grab a hold of those handles and adjust the tents down tighter to the auger if you wanted to slow the crop. This would be applicable in wet corn. You'd probably want to slow that top down to prevent from breaking shear bolts on the drive system, and probably raise it for dry crop to speed up your unload rates. Okay, for our next setting, we're going to walk around to the feeder at the front of the combine, and we're going to look at our feeder drum height. Now this drum height, this drum's got three positions, high, medium, and low. And if you were running a larger head, maybe a 12 or 16 row corn head, you're definitely going to want that in the high position. But if you're running an 8 row head, you might get away with just setting it in the medium position and leaving it for both corn and beans. If you got a real small platform, maybe 20 foot or 25 foot, which I wouldn't expect a guy to have on a flagship combine, but if you had a smaller head, you're going to want to probably set this in the low position. Or if you're doing some smaller grains like some of the grass seed, just to get a little bit better traction on the crop and bring it up in the feeder house, you're going to want to set that drum down low. So one way we can tell is we look at our adjustment here. There's a little sight glass window here, or not a glass, but a little inspection port here, and I can see part of the block is in that window, and I can see just a little sliver at the bottom, so I know we're not in the high position, I know we're not in the low position, we're in the medium position. If this hole was empty, you would know that you're in the high position, and then if it was completely covered up, then you know you're in the low position. So to adjust that, a 24 millimeter socket or a 24 millimeter wrench, and then put a crescent wrench to hold your threaded bolt, and once you crack this loose, you can turn that 90 degrees at a time. And but to do that, you'll probably want to take some sort of a prying device. I like to use a 2x4, and you can come in underneath the drum, pry up on the drum to take the weight off, and then have an assistant turn the block to the different height positions. You'll want to do that, of course, on the right side as well as over here on the left side. You've got another adjusting block to set your drum height. So once again, you want to set both of those evenly. Last but not least, as far as our outside machine settings are concerned, we'll want to look at our feeder angle. And of course you'll want to consult your header manual for its recommendation. I know on the caseihharvesting.com, when using the 3162 Draper head, they want it the feeder faceplate angle to be in the middle of the slot. So we're about midway here, so we would be set for that. For the corn heads, we're looking for 23 degrees with an angle finder at the deck plates. And then on some of the older platforms, I usually set those out in the field, and I will look at the cutter bar angle in relationship to the ground. We don't want the head to be tilted back so far that we're pushing dirt and sacrificing cut height, but at the same time we don't want the head tilted so far forward that the head turns into a rock picker. So we kind of want to find the sweet spot, and the best way to do that is in the field. There's no quick easy answer, because I know there's a lot of different tire size and configurations, and that will also change the required feeder position, or the feeder faceplate angle.